I think we're having a little bit of audio issue with Bree, so we'll go ahead and do the introductions, and then hopefully she can join back with us in just a minute. So as Bree said, welcome to this webinar about the job search process. That was Bree. She is at the University of Texas at Arlington, and within the Division of Research, or DR, she is in charge of publications and communication. Jess, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jessica Tost. I'm at the University of Texas at Austin, and I'm on the Knowledge Utilization Committee for CCDR.
And I'm Sarah Powell. I'm also at the University of Texas at Austin, and I am also on the Knowledge Utilization Committee for the Division for Research. So we're here today for the first of 6 webinars. These are brought to you by the Division for Research of the Council for Exceptional Children. You will see that initialized as DR. And if you like this webinar and you want similar programming to this webinar, DR is taking donations, $1, $5, $10. Just to continue with this programming, we're already planning for a series of webinars in the spring. And also, just as a reminder, if you aren't a member of the Division for Research and you are a person that's interested in doing research or using research, we really ask you to think about joining DR as you renew or you join CEC through your membership. Joining DR through CEC is the only way to be a member of the Division for Research. You can't just be a member of the Division for Research without being a member of CEC. So Bree is back, so I'm going to have Bree go ahead and jump in right now.
All right, hopefully it'll work this time and I won't get kicked off. You should be able to see our poll results of who is joining us today. We're excited to see everybody. And we also have some people who already have it.
So I think
we are excited to have.
So I think we're still having a little bit of issues with Bree's audio. So Jess, do you want me to take it over for a little bit right now?
Sure.
Okay, all right. So I think Bree was saying, I heard her say that most of you are on the job market this year. So we're very excited that you're joining us. But for those of you that will be on the job market in subsequent years, we hope this information is helpful. And I know one of the things that a lot of our current students are talking about right now is, well, what does the job market look like this year in terms of COVID? We're not going to specifically address that in this webinar, but we will have a time to talk about that in subsequent webinars and probably have a chat time in webinar 6 to figure out, if there aren't a lot of jobs available this year, what are some of your other opportunities to stay in academia? So our focus for today is, what is the job search process? So today we're going to focus on what are the different types of jobs, where can you find a listing of jobs, and then what is the search process from the university perspective. So we're going to give you an idea of what goes on behind closed doors so that you really get an idea when you're applying for a job what that means. So our first thing we're going to talk about is, what are the different kinds of jobs? So in this webinar series, we're focused on faculty jobs. And so many of you are likely seeking a tenure track position. And you may be focused in a tenure track position in research. You also might be interested in a tenure track position that is clinical or a practice position. Some of you might be going for an assistant professor role, and in fact, most of you would likely be going for an assistant professor role, but you will see other jobs listed for associate or full. And if you aren't aware of the labeling of different professor positions, almost everyone starts out as an assistant, and then as you go up for tenure and as you get tenure, then you are promoted to associate professor, and then down the road from that, then you are hopefully promoted to a full professor. So most of you will likely be looking for jobs that are titled assistant professor. Now, also in faculty positions, there are a lot of non-tenure track positions. Those might be contractual positions. Maybe you sign a contract for 2 or 3 years. Those also could be positions that are labeled as an adjunct position or lecturer or instructor. With those non-tenure track positions and the tenure track positions, you have to decide whether you want to focus on teaching and work at a university that's a little bit more teaching focused, or if you want to work at a university that's research focused. So this is where we will focus most of our efforts today, on faculty positions, mostly on tenure track, but you could also apply this to non-tenure track positions. And we will be focusing more on research focused universities, but all of this information would be applicable at a teaching focused university. And there are other jobs out there. So you might think about applying for a job postdoc position. Those are usually 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 years. Those will be jobs that you will see listed where we talk about these different job resources. You might be interested in a visiting professor role. Many of those might be abroad. You might also be interested at being the director of a research center, or the director of a research program or a teaching program. And then there are also jobs related to being a research associate, so working on grants and running grants, or being involved in actively working on a different type of grant. So there are lots of different jobs out there. As our little asterisk points out, our focus in this webinar series is on faculty positions. So this is not an all-inclusive list of every job that's ever been out on the market, but this is where we will be primarily focusing during this webinar. All right, so in terms of the considerations for jobs, there are lots of different things that you need to think about before you start applying for jobs. So one of the first things that we would ask you to think about is, well, what are you interested in? So what do you want to do? Do you want to do research, or do you want to focus more on teaching? Do you want to work with a team of people, or do you want to lead your own team and work more autonomously and on your own? And really asking yourself, well, what do you want to add to the world? What do you want to add to conversations related to special education, to education in general, or just to inform what's going on in schools in the United States? So you really got to think about yourself and what you want to do. The second things you need to think about are where you want to be. So do you want to live in a city, or do you want to live in the country? Do you want to buy a house, or do you want to rent a house? Do you want to be near the mountains or near the beach, or live out in the desert? Lots of different places where you can go. So where do you want to go and spend the next few years, and maybe the next 20 or 30 years of your life? You also have to think about family considerations. So are you starting a family, or do you have a young family? Do you have people that are graduating and going to college, and you need to provide financial support for them? Do you have elderly people in your environment and you need to take care of them or live close to them? That's an important consideration as well. And in this conversation, you should also think about, your finances, and what do you want for the rest of your life, and how do you want to support yourself and your family and those that are around you. So think about these things before you start applying for jobs. So where can you find a listing of jobs? In this webinar series, we're going to start today at the very beginning, and we're going to move all the way through to what happens if you have to negotiate for a job position. So when you start at the very beginning, we have to figure out, well, where do you find the listing of jobs? So the two most popular websites that are available are the Chronicle of Higher Education and HigherEdJobs, and we'll talk through each of these just briefly on the next few slides. But there are many other resources out there. We will say that the Division for Research has a listing of jobs, so you can visit that. I'll show you where to find that in just a few slides. And we're also going to want to talk to one of our colleagues from the University of Missouri. She's going to share with you a listing of special ed jobs that she has created, because she was on the job market, I guess, 2 years ago, and really wanted to help others be able to collect all the jobs that are out there and through their application process. So we're first going to start with the Chronicle of Higher Education. So if you go to the Chronicle of Higher Education website, which is chronicle.com, you can also use your favorite search engine and go to type in Chronicle Higher Ed. If you want to find jobs, your first thing you're going to do is you're going to click on the top of the screen where it says jobs. And then as you do that, there will be a screen that pulls down, and you want to say, I want to find a job, because that's what we're talking about in this webinar series. Now, after you click on Find a Job, the third thing that will pop up here is a screen where it goes to this Jobs page. And probably most of you are looking for faculty positions, so you would click on Faculty Positions, and then that brings out a screen that looks like this, and probably all of you will click on Education, although you can see that a lot of other jobs are available in different areas. And then as you click on that, it comes up with a search page that looks just a little bit like this. So one of the things that I often get intimidated by is that, oh, there's here on the day that I made this presentation, there were over 1,700 education jobs available. That's a lot of jobs to go through, but it's not really that many. So if you see over here on the left-hand side, if you are interested in special education, which we think most of you are, you click on special education, and then that will take you to a listing page where then you can refine your search within special education. So are you interested in a faculty type position? Do you want an adjunct position, tenure track or non-tenure track? Are there locations in the country where you want to live? Are there certain salary requirements that you have? I would probably leave the salary requirements not checked when I'm doing my initial search, be really open, but you can see the different types of jobs to refine your search. And then after you refine your search, you will come up with listings that looks like this. So we're going to look at this job posting today here at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. I just chose it because it was one of the first ones that came up in my search when we were looking at this a few weeks ago. But if you're interested in this job, then you click on view the details, and then it'll tell you all about this job. And if you're really interested in applying to this job, it will link you to the university website where you end up applying. For almost every position, in fact, I can't think of an example where this is not true, you apply directly to the university. So you either send your materials in via email, or you go into the university portal and you submit your materials that way. So that was just a little pass through on the Chronicle of Higher Education. Another website that has a lot of special education jobs is HigherEdJobs. So that's HigherEdJobs.com. Here you go to their first web page, and it's all about higher ed jobs. So you don't have to go through all of the Chronicle's different stories about education. But here you would click on faculty, and then that would take you to a page here that looks at education. And I'm going to today click on special education, although some of you might be interested in school psychology or teacher education or curriculum and instruction. And then once you go to that, then you can find a specific job. For example, we'll look at this assistant professor position at Southern Illinois Carbondale. And then it gives you all of the information about that job. And then you can dig deep and figure out whether this is a job that you want to apply for. Now, beyond the Chronicle of Higher Education, well, in both the Chronicle of Education, the Chronicle of Higher Education, excuse me, and Higher Ed Jobs, you'll look at job advertisements. And so one of the things I wanted to share with you today is, well, what is in a job advertisement? What should you be looking for when you're reading this information on these internet sites? So I'm going to focus on this position at Southern Illinois Carbondale. I hope that some of you will apply for it because it sounds like a pretty good one. But I just chose this one as an example. So this is not the only job that's out there, and I'm not encouraging all of you to apply for this job. Remember, you have to figure out if it's a good fit for you. So this first part of a job announcement is really a very high level overview of the job. So I see the university, I see where this job is located, what kind of category is it. That's basically the category that classifies it on the website where I found this job. And then when was it posted? And then when is the application due? And then what type of job is this? Is it a part-time job or is it a full-time job? A lot of applications will say this, and so I'm going to come back to this in a few slides. Still apply as soon as possible, because you might be like, oh, it's open until it's filled. There's always a deadline, and the deadline is buried later in this job announcement, and I'll show you where to find that. But really, apply as soon as you possibly can. So here's continuing with this job announcement. So here's where you can find the rank of the job. So I can see that this is an assistant professor position. Again, that's really the first starting rank for any professor. And I can see that this is a tenure track position. So sometimes you have to read deep into these announcements to really see what's going on here. I also see that this is a 9-month position. And we've got a little asterisk. I'll show this here at the bottom of the screen. Don't worry about this. And in fact, almost all, many faculty positions are 9-month positions in the United States. There are some faculty positions that might be 8 months or some that are 10 months, but rarely is a tenure track position a 12-month position. So what happens is then you teach during the summer, or hopefully eventually you get grant funding so that you pay for your summer salary. But I know that I'm on a 9-month contract, and I know that Jessica's on a 9-month contract. Don't let that worry you when you read this type of announcement. Also, almost every university allows for salary spread. So you might say, well, what am I supposed to do, Sarah? Like, I need to get paid in the summer. Well, every year at our university, at the beginning of the school year, they'll say, hey, do you want to take your 9-month salary and then be paid that 9-month salary over 12 months? And so you can make that decision to then have a continual paycheck. So those are just some like little side notes that are nuanced about faculty positions that definitely outside academia, these 9-month jobs would be very strange to many people. Beyond this, let's see what else we've got. So here are the tenure expectations. So they would expect that you are productive with research, publications, teaching, and service. And while that's pretty general, you could ask more about specifics of those tenure expectations when you go on the interview. And then here are all the things that they would ask you to do on the job. And I would say to read this carefully. So here I see they want you to teach both undergraduate and graduate level courses. And what's interesting here is I see assessment, functional curriculum, instructional adaptations, and behavior strategies. So, you know, if you fit into at least one of those categories, I would apply. But if you think like, oh, I can't really teach any of those things, you might want to apply, but also know that they're looking for someone that can teach classes in these areas. They'll ask you to serve on graduate committees. They'll ask you to serve on committees at the college level or the university level. They want you to conduct research and publish, and they also want you to seek external funds. Those are pretty typical duties and responsibilities, especially for a tenure track position. But those are some of the things that you might be interested in learning more about this university when you apply. Now, in terms of the minimum qualifications, most jobs will say like, okay, here's the basic minimum. So I think the most important thing to note in here is that you have to have your PhD by August 15th, 2021. So if you are a current student and you're working on your dissertation and you've got a great timeline and you say, yes, I will be done by next August, go ahead and apply. But if you aren't planning to collect your dissertation data until next summer and you won't have it written up by August, do not apply. They will not actually give you the job if you do not show that you have defended your dissertation. So talk to your mentor or your advisor about your timeline and see if it is reasonable for you to start by August 15th. I know of one case where a person got a job and they didn't finish their PhD on time, and so then they were not able to start that job until the January semester. The university will not give you the job if you do not have that degree. They also, for minimum qualifications, went peer-reviewed or scholarly publications. So that's a pretty standard qualification, but they don't tell you how many, right? And so that's really up to you to decide whether you meet those minimum qualifications. In terms of the preferred qualifications, a lot of jobs will say like, but this is what we want. Don't let this list scare you, right? So I look at this list when I was going out on the job market, it says experience for extramural funding. Well, I didn't have that. I mean, that would be nice for all of us to have, but most of us don't graduate a PhD program with grant funding. Many of us don't graduate with university teaching experience. So while these are preferred qualifications, don't let them stop you from applying. Really, the minimum qualifications should tell you whether you should or could apply for that job, and the preferred qualifications are nice to have, but they aren't absolutely necessary. Then we keep going. So here's the way to apply. So again, you're going to go through the university website to apply. And then what will you be asked to submit? A cover letter, which is very standard, a resume or CV, very standard, and your transcripts. Most universities will ask for those. There might be other required documents that aren't listed here. So if you're really interested in this job, I would go ahead and suggest going to the website and creating probably like a portfolio for yourself within that job website, and then see what other things they want you to upload. Do they want a list of recommenders? Do they actually want letters from the people that are going to write your letters of recommendation? So spend a little bit of time in that website, because there might be additional things that they require, and you don't want to be caught on the last day not having all of those things put in. Now, this person here says that they are the contact information. They may or may not be the search committee chair. Sometimes they might be an administrative person who's in charge of the search. But if you have any questions, that's going to be the person to reach out and ask your questions to. And then finally, there it is. Remember how we said earlier, hey, there's no real deadline? Well, there is actually a deadline. So they say, we will start reviewing applications beginning October 16th. So to me, I would interpret that as my application has to be in on October 15th, because I would almost imagine that the committee is going to meet on October 16th or that week to start to review the applications. But then they always put this line in here. We see this a lot, and it's a little bit of, it's misleading, because it says applications will be accepted after this date. So you might say, oh, well, Sarah, I don't have to submit till November. That is not a guarantee. So while applications may be accepted after October 16th, if you're really interested in this job, you better have your application in well before the October 16th review date. So don't plan on that thing there at the end. So beyond the Chronicle of Higher Education and Higher Ed Jobs, there are many other ways that you can find listings of jobs. So the Council for Exceptional Children, the Division for Research, which is hosting this awesome webinar, we have started to compile job announcements on our website. And so you'll see that some of these jobs are faculty research jobs. Some of these, like I see the first one here when I pulled this the other day, is a training specialist or a postdoctoral fellowship. A lot of you might be interested in that. You can sign up to get these job announcements sent to you as they come out. You can also follow DR on social media, both Twitter and Facebook, and we will be updating this list of jobs all the time. Now, beyond the Division for Research, I want to introduce you to my colleague, Jessica Rodriguez. Jessica is from the University of Missouri, and she's going to tell you a little bit about a list of resources that she put together. Oops, I'm going to go to Jessica's page. Jessica's going to unmute her microphone and tell us a little bit about why she started putting a list of jobs together, and then how she maintains this job list. So Jessica, thanks so much for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about how you put together jobs.
Thank you, and hello everyone. I'm so thrilled to join you all on this webinar, and thank you for asking me to be a part of this webinar series. So hello, I'm Jessica Rodriguez, and I started this list last year when I was in my first year as an assistant professor at the University of Missouri. And the reason I did that was because when I was on the job market only 2 years ago, not long ago at all, I had great mentors in my corner supporting me, helping me with my materials and the stress of being on the job market too. And so I wanted to do something to help all of you who are now embarking on the job market. I know what it feels like. I went through it just 2 years ago. And one of the challenges was every day I wanted to see, is there a new job posted? Where can I find it? And Sarah was great in going through all of these websites where you can find different job postings, but that can also be overwhelming, right? That there's so many different places to go to. And every day I would have multiple tabs open on my computer and looking at all of the different tabs, all of the different websites to locate jobs. And it could be overwhelming sometimes. So this was not my original idea. I cannot take credit for this. I saw other fields doing this, like in ed psychology and learning sciences, where someone just decided to try to find all the job postings they could and just put them in one spot. So this is just my best effort. I do this on my own. So there's no guarantee that it has all of the listings, but I do try to go to all of the websites, use all of the experience I have of where to find the job postings, and just try to put them in one spot. So I do faculty positions and also postdoc positions as well. So you'll see that there on the slide. On the left side, I have faculty positions. On the right is postdoc. I include the links, some basic information for you to look further into this job. And where you can find it, I believe in the chat they shared the link. So you can access that link and see my list. You'll see at the top when I last updated it. I try to stay on top of it and update it regularly. And I also talk about it on Twitter. So you can also find it on Twitter. That's the hashtag right there. It's hashtag, one of the longest hashtags you'll ever see, hashtag special ed, higher ed jobs. So you can do that. If you're not on Twitter, you can still access it. So you can still go onto Twitter and do a hashtag search, or just look me up on Twitter and you'll see that I've been posting about it. So I hope it's helpful. One of my hopes is that you'll still go to all of these other websites. You'll still do your own searches. So it doesn't take that out of the game for you. You should still be doing that. But I just hope you also check here and that it just kind of like helps you breathe a little bit. Like, okay, I did see all of these. This was already on my list. Just gives you another, hopefully, sense of relief that you know what's out there, that you're seeing all of the postings that you possibly can, and that you're not missing something, because that was something that always stressed me out. Like, well, maybe I need to just check one more website because what if I missed something? So that is my hope. And yes, I hope you find it helpful. And if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to me. I did a postdoc before I started as an assistant professor. So I also know about applying to postdocs, applying to faculty positions, and I'd be happy to talk more.
All right, thank you so much, Jessica. And Jessica Toss just shared a direct link to your website, and I will say that a few people are already checking it out. So hopefully that resource will be helpful to them and many others. And we thank you as a special ed community for putting this information together for our people that are going out on the job market. It's very, very helpful. So thanks so much, Jessica. So other places to find listings for jobs. So you can follow the Division for Research on Twitter. We're also on Facebook. You will see that a lot of individuals post different opportunities. So if there are places that you want to work, reach out to people. This is especially important for postdoc opportunities. If you are on Twitter, I see a lot of jobs posted on Twitter. Maybe you are a little anxious about going on Twitter, but maybe you just open a Twitter account just to follow jobs. I saw some postdoc opportunities posted this week at different universities. And if there are people that you really want to work with, reach out to those people and ask, or if there's an area where you really want to live, I want to live in Southern California, reach out to people that work at those universities and ask them if they know if there's any positions that are upcoming for this year or following years. Don't overburden people with these questions, but some of you may have some really specific places where you want to work, areas where you want to live. And so it's okay to let people know that you are on the job market, because often we might say, well, you know what, we don't have a faculty position next year, but I think we're going to list something for next year. And so that might be a helpful thing for you to know. You can also access all of these jobs will be posted on individual university websites, but sometimes that gets really cumbersome going through those. And I can say that almost any university job is also going to be posted on HigherEdJobs or also on the Chronicle of Higher Ed. So you don't have to spend a lot of time on university websites unless there's a specific university that you really want to work at, and then you could visit their website and see if the job is posted there as well. All right, so what we have done is we have interviewed some of our DR members about how did they locate jobs. And so these are all members that have only been out on in their jobs for just the last 1 to 5 years. And so we wanted to share their experience about finding jobs. I'll go ahead and get that queued up right now.
So I just signed up to receive daily emails from both HigherEdJobs, the Chronicle of Higher Education, and then I just made sure that I was actively sort of paying attention to the listservs that I was part of already. So that's where I would suggest to look for jobs.
Initially out of grad school, I relied on the Chronicle of Higher Education, different listservs, and my advisor. I went on the job market again as a junior faculty, and there I relied on the Chronicle again, and also my colleagues. They became a pretty invaluable source.
And I really spent most of my time identifying jobs through the Chronicle of Higher Education and being a part of a variety of different listservs that CEC puts out. AERA has a variety of job listservs, and Pacific Coast Research Conference also had a great listserv that sent out jobs once a month.
I located jobs through HigherEdJobs.com, the Higher Education Recruitment Consortium website, or HERC, as well as the Chronicle of Higher Education. I also let all of my mentors and other people that I've worked with in the field, I let them know that I was looking for a job so that they could send me any job announcements that they received via email.
So I think one of the things that you see there is the same resources listed time and time again, but at least 2 of our DR members also mentioned the importance of reaching out to people and talking to a mentor. So I don't want to skip that part in terms of the job application process. Now we've been talking about applying for jobs, so we also asked our DR members, well, how many applications did you submit? And I think you might be surprised at the variation of applications submitted.
I submitted 12 applications to tenure track jobs in the United States.
I submitted probably roughly 30, but I will say that I applied to a bunch of positions that were not a great fit for what my research interest was and what the posting listed.
I submitted 6 applications. I had 3 initial interviews, 2 on-campus interviews, and 2 job offers.
My advisor told me to submit early and often, so my first go around right out of grad school, I probably submitted 15 applications. Second time around, probably the same amount, so I've probably submitted about 30 applications.
I submitted about 13 job applications. I wasn't geographically bound to any area, so I made sure to submit applications to any job that I thought was a good fit for my background as well as my career trajectory.
I submitted 6 faculty applications and then was also in conversations with 2 or 3 PIs about a potential postdoctoral position as well.
So you can see that usually people don't apply just to one place, but often to several places. So in terms of feeling comfortable with those minimum qualifications, if you're interested in that job, we would suggest that you apply for that job. So now Jessica is going to talk about the search process from the university perspective.
All right, so we're going to walk through, and Sarah and I are going to try to mind meld the animations here, but we're going to walk through the search process. So what does this look like from the time a job comes into creation at a university until the time they make an offer? So the first thing that happens way before you have any idea this job is going to be posted is that at the institution, they get approval from the dean and the university that they can start a job search and they can put a posting out. So that process sometimes takes a while, and sometimes you might see jobs come out in August and others in September, October, November, and usually that's because that process is still happening. Next, they form a search committee. So a chair of the search committee is chosen. It's usually someone directly in that program area, and that usually has 3 to 4 other people. Almost every search committee will have at least one member who's outside of the department, so who's sort of an external member of the committee. They'll then advertise the position, and within the department or the unit, they'll decide where are we going to post this, where will people see our ads. Often it depends who's on the search committee. They'll send it out to the listservs that they belong to or the organizations that they belong to. They'll accept applications, and as Sarah mentioned already, there's usually, we will say, you know, we're going to accept applications until we find the perfect candidate or the best candidate for this job. But usually there's a closing date, because then the committee will get together after that closing date to look at the applications. It's usually, there's a lot of variability, but at least 1 month, up to 3 months after you see it posted. Once that closing date is reached, then the search committee will get together to review applications. So that's one of the reasons why you could submit it a little later and you might still get reviewed. But once the search committee has sat and gone through all the applications they may have already moved forward with where we're going next in this process. So you may sort of miss out just by being a little bit too late. What happens when they go through the first batch of applications is they decide who they're going to follow up with to conduct screening interviews. So we'll review applications for, do people meet the criteria, what we're looking for in these positions? Are they going to be a fit in this unit, in this program area? Are they going to be able to teach or do research in the areas we're looking to fill? And so the screening process will usually look like Zoom interviews or maybe old school Skype interviews. It will be narrowed down depending on the position to perhaps 6 to 10 candidates. And these are pretty short. So they're really they are truly screeners. They probably will not go more than 20 to 30 minutes. From there, from that pool of candidates who were screened, the search committee will decide on anywhere from 2 to 4 candidates to invite for on-campus interviews. Generally, the norm is 3 candidates will get invited for an on-campus interview, but that might vary a little bit. And so they will put forward their recommendations for on-campus interviews. The department chair will agree to that list, and then the dean and the university will approve that. Folks will be invited, so you would get an invitation to come to an on-campus interview. When we do our webinar in a few weeks on on-campus interviews, we'll talk about things like, how would you get invited? How do you get there? Who sets up your schedule? What does that look like? So once that happens, people will come, we'll conduct on-campus interviews. These might vary. Sometimes it's just 1 full day, sometimes it's a day and a half or 2 full days, but there's a whole schedule of things that you'll do during that process of being on campus. And then the search committee will gather again. They'll collect feedback from students, other faculty members, the dean, the department chairs, anyone who's met with the candidates to get sort of opinions on them. And they will make a decision of who they would like to put forward an offer and potentially hire in the department. So this will go forward to a department vote, and then it will move forward to get approval from the dean. So the chair would put the recommendation forward of who they would like to make an offer to, which candidate, and the dean would approve that, the university would approve that before an offer is made. And then hopefully the candidate gets hired, hopefully you get hired. And so it will look slightly different. We'll talk about this in the negotiation webinar, but you might get an email or you might get a phone call. It might be from the search committee chair, it might be from the department chair, it might be from the dean directly, but they would make you an offer and then they would give you a period of time in which you have to decide and get back to them on that. You would go through negotiations. So based on the initial offer you receive, you would negotiate based on sort of your expectations for that job. You might go back and forth a couple of times on that. And then finally, you would be hired and you'd start your job. Hooray. And almost every job will start somewhere between August 1 and September 1. Want to add anything to that timeline, Sarah or Bree?
I think that was really a good timeline.
All right.
Well, and we're going to hear from some of our DR members. They're going to talk about their universities' timelines, and you actually will see some differences across universities. Yeah.
So you'll see we have two little videos here. One is going to be DR members talking about how a search committee is organized at their institutions. And then the second is what is the timeline for the search at their institutions.
Primarily, the department chair selects committee members. There's usually a range of committee members from the department that come together, as well as one outside member, so a member from another department on campus that also will be on the committee. It's usually 4 to 5 faculty members.
Typically 5 people, 3 people from the program that's hiring. So in my case, it would be special education, and then 2 other people. 1 person who's in the department, the same department the special education is in, and then another person who represents the college but isn't in the same department. So typically 5 people.
So the search committees at the 2 institutions where I've been are typically appointed by the dean or appointed by the department chair and then approved by the dean. And the majority of members of that search committee are from within the department where we're doing the search. So we're searching for a special ed faculty member. 3 out of the 5 or 4 out of the 5 search committee members are from our special ed department. And there's at least 1 outside member, and that person is from outside the department, not outside the school or college.
I just arrived at Stanford, so I'm not really sure how we do things here. But in my previous institutions, primarily there's a group of about 3 or 4 faculty members from the department. So when I was previously at Vanderbilt, that would have been from the special education department. And then usually 1 faculty member from outside the special education department, and then often at least 1 student member. And so those are the people who are typically on the search committee, and there is usually 1 faculty member, oftentimes a more senior faculty member who serves as the chair of that committee. And the chair, it should be your primary contact. That's the person that's really going to be the individual that you email, ask questions to, that is really kind of the person that's there to really assist you in getting your application in, answering any questions that you have about the job. And you should really view them as a good friend, because their job is to get the best person from the candidate, or the best candidate for the position, and hopefully that's you.
Generally, positions are announced in late summer or early fall. Usually around September is a big time for position announcements. Applications are typically due in late fall, October or November, sometime in that range. That's when the application review begins by the search committee. If there are video interviews being conducted with a smaller group of applicants, those usually take place around December or perhaps early January. And then on-campus interviews tend to occur beginning, say, like late January into February, and sometimes into March, depending on how quickly the search committee moves.
Usually we post in the beginning of August. We hope to have enough applicants to review, let's say by the end of September or mid-October. We try to make decisions on who we want to have preliminary online interviews with by certainly by late October, and then who we want to bring in for on-campus interviews. Hopefully we can schedule those and get those in before, let's say, Thanksgiving break. And then hopefully we're making decisions before the beginning of the new year.
For what I've seen in the past, the job description is drafted and submitted usually around August or September, trying with the goal to get it posted in the month of October and then advertised October, November, and then a closing date somewhere around that time, perhaps by December 1, and that could be give or take a month or so there. But usually in the fall, that's the work, and then there's usually a phone interview phase or a Skype interview or a WebEx interview, whatever technology we're using phase, and that might happen in January. And then there's a campus visit phase, and that might happen around February. And then the goal is to have the search wrapped up by the end of February, early March. That's a typical timeline that I've experienced before as a search committee chair and member.
All right, so you can see across, there's sort of norms or standard procedure across all institutions, but they do differ. And you can notice even in the last video, some institutions really try to get everything done, to have their posting out very early and to have sort of hired before the winter break. And some institutions that is happening later into once we get into the spring semester. So it doesn't make them better or worse jobs. You shouldn't be worried if you don't have a job offer by January, there's still time, but you can see they differ slightly. So a couple of tips to kind of wrap up, and then I think we'll have a couple of minutes for questions. One big tip is to seek guidance and advice from your mentors. So whether that's your doctoral advisor, your postdoc advisor, other faculty at your institution, make sure you have a few people that you can go to ask advice. You can ask them to read over your cover letter. You can ask them about institutions. So if you're looking at job postings or you have an offer to go on for an on-campus interview, you can ask folks, you know, like, do you know anything about this department? What should I be thinking of when I go there? Also seek guidance from folks who have recently found jobs. So if you have colleagues who have started positions in the last couple of years, ask them about their process. And hopefully across this webinar series, it will give you the opportunity to hear from folks who have recently gone through this as well. As Sarah mentioned right in the beginning, kind of the last 2 points here are know what you want and know what you need from a job. So make sure you are going into this to meet your needs for yourself and your family. So know what you're looking for, but make sure you're also flexible, recognizing that, you know, there is not a department with the exact job you want in every single city in the country. And so be flexible with where you're going to go. Don't apply for jobs that you know you would never, ever take. So it's not a good use of your time and it's not a good use of the search committee's time. If you think you might take it, then that's a different question. But if you know there's no way you would ever accept this job, then you should not waste your time or the search committee's time. But do apply for jobs that you think are interesting, but worry are not exactly the right fit or that you might be underqualified for. So if you see a job that seems a great fit for you, but they say at the assistant level that you have to have a history of extramural funding, and you're worried that you've never had any federal grants because you're just graduating from the doc program, still apply for that job, for sure. If they say they're looking for someone in a certain area that seems kind of broad and you're worried that's not your area, but you do seem to be a good fit with the department, still apply for that job or reach out to the contact person or the search committee chair and ask them if you would be a good fit. And some kind of like motivating rah-rah tips as you're moving forward, because this can be a long process. Make sure you're applying to many jobs. You saw the range there. Folks applied anywhere from a few jobs up to 30 jobs, depending on the year. So it may not be your dream job, the thing you've been dreaming of for the past few years, but you never really know. And so I always say to my students that sometimes you have in your head, my dream job is to be in this department at this institution. And it's happened to many of us before that you interview in that department at that institution and you feel like, actually, this is not a great fit. So don't just stick to sort of what you think is going to be the best job for you. And if you don't get a job or if you don't get an offer after the screening or after the on-campus interview, don't, as much as we are prone to do this, don't take it as a slight against you or your work. It's usually all about fit. So if you've got to the point where you're being screened or you're invited for an on-campus interview, that means you have a strong file. And so that means they've looked at your file, they think you're strong, and you just weren't a good fit, or you didn't have the expertise or the specific sort of the profile that they were looking for that position. All right, I'll turn it over. I think Bree was gonna wrap us up. Are you back, Bree? All right, I'll wrap us up. So, so thank you for coming to this webinar. We're going to look at the chat and answer a couple of questions before we sign off. As you know, we have 6 more webinars. So if you like this webinar and are able to, please consider donating even just $1 to DR. The link is there. It was also in the email reminder that you received. If you're not yet a member of CEC or DR, consider joining. We do lots of fun things. And I think our last slide has the next webinar. So next Friday, we're going to be talking about application packages. And then we'll be talking about the initial interview, that screening interview, then the on-campus interview, the job talk specifically. So we've actually separated 2 webinars, one for the on-campus interview broadly, and then one just for the job talk. And then the last one is going to be about negotiating. So I have an offer, good, exciting times. What do you do next?
All right, Jess, so I think we do have a few minutes to open it up to questions, and there's been one question that's come into the chat box so far. I'll go ahead and move back here. We'll go to our last slide here just to hold position there. But one of the questions says, in your experience on committees, do you communicate with applicants not selected for a preliminary interview to let them know that? Would you like to answer that one?
You can go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, yeah, so this question's Nicole, or no, this question was not Nicole, somebody, let's see, Jordan. Jordan, yes, but not in the time that you want to hear about it. So in my experience on committees, we review all the applications, and then as Jessica said, then we send the names, here's who we want to screen, here's who we want to on-campus interview, and that type of thing. And then you will not get a no or a rejection letter until that whole process is finished. So if you apply in October, and maybe you get a screening interview, but you don't get an on-campus interview, or maybe you don't get a screening interview, you will likely not be notified of that until the candidate has signed the paperwork and they are coming to that university, which could happen in March, April, or May of the year. One of the things that I found that was really helpful when I was on the job market is a lot of my friends and colleagues were too. And so we had just kind of a pact that we all talked about this openly. We tried not to be in competition with each other, even though we were applying for many of the same jobs. But I would talk to one of my colleagues and he would say, oh, I got a screening interview at this university. And I would be like, okay, well then that means I didn't get one. So really having knowledge of what other people were doing was very helpful to me when I was on the market. Let's see if we have, yeah, go ahead.
That, Sarah, as like a funny point too, you will see many, like this has happened to me, and you will see people tweet about this all the time. It is not uncommon to get a letter a year after the fact when you're already in a different job telling you weren't selected
you
for
did it, yeah.
You're like, okay, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think as what would you say, a rule of thumb, if the application deadline is October 15th and you haven't heard anything from them, probably in 6 to 8 weeks, you can mostly make an assumption that you're not one of their top candidates. I think that's but I would not email the committee and say, hey, made decisions yet. I think that's really something that people don't do. So I wouldn't suggest following up if you haven't heard. Namita asks, when you see the job requirements posted, is the order that they are listed representative of how much time you're expected to spend on these responsibilities? So for example, if teaching is first, followed by research, do you think teaching will be your biggest component that you spend the most time on? What do you think, Jess?
I'm trying to think of different postings. I think a lot of them will. I don't know if they change the order because I'm thinking of our postings.
I think ours just remain consistent. But you know, I would say that's when you have a screening interview or an on-campus interview, that's the time to ask those questions. You know, how much time does a typical assistant professor spend in a week or a month on research, teaching, service, that type of thing.
And you can ask what the teaching load is at that in that department. That will give you a very clear sort of direction in terms of how much time you're expected to commit to teaching versus research. You can also, and I would recommend doing this, we'll talk about this in the other webinar, but before you do a screening interview, and especially before your on-campus interview, look at the profiles online of faculty in that department. So you can look at their CVs and see what kind of work they're doing. That will give you a little bit of a sense as well. But usually a posting will really emphasize
what you're supposed to do. Yeah. Marie asks, how late do jobs for a fall start, so for example, August of 2021, get posted? Marie, I would say typically the latest you'll see an August of 2021 job posted for perhaps like a research tenure track position would be around October or November. But I will say, Marie, we are in an unusual year. A lot of universities are reevaluating their budgets. And so, you know, if a person has retired in a department, that doesn't mean that job is available next year. That has to go through all of these university chains. Do we want to commit this much money to this position? Because it's not money for 1 year. It's typically money for 5 or 6 years before you go up for tenure. So that could be a $500,000 to $700,000 commitment from the university. And I think right now universities are a little bit shy on this. So it wouldn't surprise me if this was a year where we might see more things put up in January or February after universities have evaluated their budgets and say, okay, it is okay to hire this year. But
and if you're looking at teaching colleges, those sometimes do come out later.
So in the spring, yeah.
So last year, some positions came out in March or April. So depending on the positions you're looking for, they may come out a little later.
We have a question from Emily. Many special ed jobs require previous experience teaching. For those of us who are, quote, related professionals, should we only apply for jobs that say teaching or related experience, or does that suggest flexibility? Emily, I can answer this based on my own experience. I am a general education trained person who taught kindergarten. And so I have never been in my own special education classroom teaching students, but I have accrued before I was on the job market about 10 years of teaching classrooms, tutoring hundreds of students for thousands of hours. And so in my cover letter, which we will start to talk about next week, I said, I've never been a special education classroom teacher, but I have worked for 7 years tutoring children one-on-one or in small groups. And so I took that related experience, and I didn't say that it was a negative thing, but I actually put it into a positive thing. But I will also say that go ahead and apply for those jobs if you have some related experiences that could fulfill that, quote, teaching experience bullet point. Another question from Christy. I might be interested in an international position, a postdoc or visiting faculty. Where would I find those positions posted?
Similar places. I mean, the Chronicle for sure, HigherEdJobs. I'm Canadian, so I would, the institutions in Canada that I would have applied to or posted on the Chronicle, HigherEdJobs. So I think just keeping up with those. Postdocs are similar to what Sarah was saying at the beginning. Postdocs often aren't advertised as broadly. So if there's someone you're interested in doing a postdoc with, or an institution you're interested in a postdoc in, keep your eyes open there, or reach out to people directly about postdocs.
Agreed. Amy asks, I've heard that other fields have job search wikis that informally track what happens with the postings. Is there one for special ed? I love this idea, Amy. I'm not aware of it, but I would guess it might exist. So we'll try to ask some of our colleagues and friends this upcoming week to see if that thing exists in special ed and if we can track down that. Jordan asks, are there any tips on the chances of a new PhD being considered for a posting listed as assistant/associate or open rank? Jess, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I mean,
yes.
I don't know if we can answer what are the chances, but I think if it is listed as assistant, associate, or open rank, you should apply for it if you're a fit for what they're asking for. It means they're looking for a person who is a good fit with, you don't know what they're looking for, but a good fit in terms of filling a research portfolio or a teaching portfolio. So you should apply for it. You will definitely get a sense when you do, if you get invited to a screening interview or an on-campus interview, if they're really looking for someone more senior, they either won't invite junior people in that process, or it will become obvious what they're looking for. But if it's posted that way, you should definitely apply for it.
And I will say, like at our university, we've had some positions cross-listed like this, and there aren't as many people applying at the associate level because a lot of people like their jobs and they don't want to change them. So I would go ahead and throw your hat in the ring. If it's a job that you're interested in, don't get overwhelmed. There will not be as many associate candidates as there would be assistant level candidates. And we'll answer one last question here and then finish up. Jessica asks, I'm interested in research-focused positions. If you're not familiar with an institution or department, what kind of research do you do to learn more about whether that position would be a good fit with your research interests and the type of culture you want to be a part of?
So I would say the first thing you should do, and if you're invited to, I mean, you can do this even before you apply, but then if you're invited to a screening interview and then more in depth before an on-campus interview, is read faculty's profiles. You don't have to read every publication they've ever had. I like to kind of like scan faculty's publication list and know what kind of work they do. And the more connected to my work it is, the more in depth I read their profile and their work. So I think looking at folks in the department and what kind of work they're doing research-wise and sort of more broadly in terms of service and advocacy. The type of culture is harder to tell. You might know people who are in that department or have connections. They could give you tips going in, but usually you can't really tell that until you go for your on-campus interview. And so I think one really good thing you get from an on-campus interview is sort of like, they're interviewing you, but you're also there thinking like, could I see myself working with these people? Could I see myself being a good fit in this department? Not just in terms of my research, but in terms of the place I want to be and who I want to see every day and work with.
And I agree with all of those points. And I think especially if you're really interested in doing research, finding a university that has a good support network for research. So good pre and post grant support, a good budgeting administrative people that can help you with all of that. And those are most likely things that you aren't going to know on the front end, but you'll learn more about during the job process. So we're going to go ahead and close up here. I know we're just a few minutes past our deadline. We hope that all of you will join us next Friday, same time, same place, to figure out how do you prepare your application materials. And this webinar is being recorded, and we will have it up on the DR website in probably just a few days. And so follow DR on Twitter or follow DR on Facebook, and we will do a blast out when that recording is up and available. So thank you so much for joining, and we hope you all have a wonderful Friday.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.